Within that 40-foot property are overhead wires that extend from Main Street south all the way down to Washington Road. And directly to the west of that lot, again, are additional residential single-family and multi-family units. Today is undeveloped.
Previously mined for sand and gravel.
Were trees along Main Street and some pockets of isolated wetlands along the southeast and northeast corners. Rains from a west to east direction with the grades approximately 60 to 65 along the westerly property line, down to approximately 10 to 15 down on the easterly side along Kurtz Creek. 3 man-made ditches that convey runoff from the property to Kurtz Creek before it enters and is underneath Main Street to the county culvert and out to Groundwater River. There's one access point to the site today, approximately 550 feet, intersection of Kimball Drive East and Main Street, which provides access to the site today. And throughout the site, there are many gravel trails and pathways that basically provide access to limited areas. The second exhibit, which is marked A2, overall plan exhibit, again with today's date. Polarized rendering of the site plan, again overlaid on top of the aerial photo showing the surrounding property. We're proposing 3 warehouse buildings here. Buildings A and B, which are the westerly and center buildings, run in the north-south direction. Building C, which is the easterlymost building, runs in a west-east direction. Starting with Building A, which is the westerly building, we're proposing a total of 852,650 square feet. That building is broken down as follows. 816,650 square feet of that building is designated as warehouse, with 36,000 square feet of that being office. The office is broken up into 4 components, 9,000 square foot chunks located at each of the 4 corners of the building. Is a double loaded building, meaning it has loading docks on both the westerly and easterly sides. We're proposing a total of 159 loading docks for Building A, 79 of those located on the westerly side, 80 of those being located on the easterly side. Loading docks measure 14 feet in width by 50 feet in depth. There was a total of 221 trailer storage spaces for the trucks. Those are located on the westerly side of the building. 115 are located on the easterly side of the building. Those measure 12 feet in width by 60 feet in depth. There's parking being proposed on both the northerly and southerly side of the building. A total of 224
Parking stalls. Those measure 9 feet in width by 18 feet in depth with 24-foot drive aisles. Along with 16 of those parking stalls are ADA compliant parking stalls, and they are located closest to the 4 office spaces. We're also showing some land bank parking along the southerly parking field in the event in the future a tenant needs additional parking or the borough feels that the site is underparked and needs additional parking. In total, with the additional land bank parking, we are proposing 273 parking stalls for Building A. Building B, which is the center building, is a total of 687,940 square feet. And that's broken down as 651,940 square feet of warehouse and 36,000 square feet of office. Again, the office is broken up into 9,000 square foot chunks located at each of the 4 corners. It is, just like Building A, a double loaded building with a total of 122 loading docks. 57 are located on the westerly side, 65 located on the easterly side. We're proposing 193 trailer storage spaces. 103 are located on the west, with 90 located on the easterly side of the building. And then again, parking on the northerly and southerly side of the building, 210 parking stalls total. Again, 9 feet in width by 18 feet in depth, with 16 ADA parking stalls, again, located closest to the office space. Now we're showing for Building B, we're showing some additional land bank parking, not only on the northerly side, but also on the southerly side. And if you include the land bank parking for Building B alone, we're proposing 385 parking stalls total, including the land bank parking. Lastly, we have Building C, which is the easterlymost building. It's a total of 240 square feet. That's broken down as 222,000 square feet of warehouse and 18,000 square feet of office. The office is located at the southwest and southeast corners of the building. This is a single loaded building, loading docks on the northerly side, 41 of those, and 31 trailer storage spaces directly across the truck dock from those loading docks. On the southerly side of that building, we're proposing 156 parking stalls, with 8 of those being ADA compliant. So in total, we are proposing 1,780,590 square feet total of warehouse and office for this particular application. Now, we were showing 322 loading docks based across all 3 of those. Our interpretation of the redevelopment ordinance for the number of trailer storage spaces we assumed was based on truck spaces, not just trailer storage, but also the loading docks. The board engineer corrected us and noted that we don't have enough trailer storage spaces on site. So instead of adding more trailer storage spaces to increase impervious coverage, what we're actually going to reduce the overall loading docks from 322 to 296. Therefore, we comply and we do not request a variance from the ordinance. So in total, we require 518 parking stalls, and we're proposing 590 to be constructed. But if you include the land bank parking, it could be up to 814 if needed. There are 2 means of access that are being proposed. The first is the easterly access directly across from Kimball Drive East, in which we are constructing a proposed signal. As part of that improvement, we are also going to widen Main Street approximately 10 to 12 feet to provide ample turning lanes, shoulders, and throughways to meet the Middlesex County requirements. We're proposing a 5-foot wide sidewalk along the entire frontage along Main Street, along with crosswalks and ADA ramps at each of the driveways. The westerly driveway, directly across from Kimball Drive West, as submitted, shows that a proposed traffic signal was going to be installed there. Recently, Middlesex County has come back and said that based on the trips generations and their calculations, they're showing that a traffic signal is not warranted at that intersection. What the applicant is going to do is the applicant is going to install all necessary improvements at that intersection, all conduit, ramps, and bond for that signal. In the event that in the future, if and when the county decides and feels that that signal is necessary, it can be constructed in a means that is not disruptive to that intersection. Circulation is allowed and permitted on all 4 sides of these buildings to help promote safety for fire protection if needed. We are proposing compactors located at the end of each of the truck docks, along with some masonry dumpster enclosures outside in case the tenant needs additional space. All of this is going to be collected by a private hauler, and they dictate based on the tenant's needs how often they must come to the site to remove the garbage and recycling. We're also providing pedestrian access throughout the entire development off of Main Street. There's not one office space being proposed that you cannot access by walking from either of the entranceways off of Main Street. The 2 existing bus stops that are located on Main Street across from Kimball Drive West and East are also going to be relocated back. They're being maintained, but because of the widening, they're going to be relocated back a little further. As the applicant's attorney had indicated, this is a variance-free application, but we are requesting 1 waiver. And the waiver is to provide sidewalks along aisles and driveways. And where we are not providing that are on the outermost parking runs for both buildings A and B. And the reason being is if I was to park in the last spot across from the building, in order to comply, I would have to add a sidewalk away from the building, walk away from the building, walk down a sidewalk, and then across to the building. I know everyone is going to get out of their car. They're going to walk around across the 24-foot drive aisle and right into the building. So instead of adding that additional sidewalk on the perimeter of all of those parking stalls for buildings A and B, we're requesting a waiver as we feel it's unnecessary for this particular development. We are phasing this into 3 separate phases as required by the redevelopment ordinance. Phase 1 is the largest of the 3 phases. It includes the construction of Building A, which is the westerly building, the construction of the signal at Kimball Drive East, the improvements along Main Street, including the sidewalk and the widening, the loop road that circles around buildings A and B, and the constructed wetlands basin being located up at the northeast corner, which I'll talk about briefly. It also includes a water main extension that I'm also going to talk about shortly, that's going to extend underneath Conrail and interconnect with Lakeview Drive. Phase 2 includes the construction of Building B, which is the center building, and also the westerlymost driveway opposite Kimball Drive West. And then finally, Phase 3 is the construction of Building C and the loading and parking associated with that. The applicant had an acoustical engineer review the property for sound. And he set up 3 days in which he did testing. And his initial testing was locating a monitor along Main Street, one along the railroad, and then two, kind of a third of the way down and then 2/3 of the way down along the westerly property line. And he wanted to get some testing to figure out what the ambient sound was around the property. And what he found was that at all 4 locations, they all exceeded the state noise regulation. Now, Main Street was the worst. There wasn't 1 hour in that 3-day in which the state noise regulations were met. And the regulations are between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., you are allowed a limit of 65 decibels. Between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., it drops down to 50 decibels. Now, my testimony, I don't think I'm talking that loud. I'm probably talking around 70 decibels. 60 is if you were in a living room with a TV on, and 50 decibels, which is what the requirement is at nighttime at the property line, is a quiet office. No one talking, just a quiet office, just to kind of give you a gauge of what those levels are. So regardless of what the existing levels are, the state requires that the property itself, regardless of surrounding sounds, meet the noise and sound requirements. And what his model showed was that a sound barrier was required along the westerly access road and along the northerly access road. These are going to be 18-foot tall sound walls. They were submitted as a product called a ply wall, which is kind of a post plank panel in which we've utilized on many warehouse applications. But based on the recommendations from the board's engineer, we're going to change that to a concrete panel type system, which is approximately 5 inches thick, each of those panels, but the same height, same length. The westerly sound wall is 2,340 linear feet, with the northerly wall at just over 1,500 linear feet.
Mr. Ullman, could you just point out on the board where that would be?
I certainly can. So the westerly sound barrier starts at the southwest corner of the property, extends parallel with the westerlymost access road, and then kind of heads off in a northeast corner direction up towards the entrance off of Main Street. The northerly starts approximately in the middle of Building A and runs in an easterly direction towards the access point off of Kimball Drive East, and then wraps around towards Main Street. So with the addition of those 2 sound barriers, this property, acting alone, meets the sound requirements per the state for these activities. These plans were developed prior to the beginning of the year, and in January of this year, there was a requirement adopted that make-ready electric charging stations be required for both residential developments and also commercial. And based on the 518 parking stalls that are required for this property, we require 21 EV made-ready stations. 2 of those will have to be ADA compatible, and the applicant will do those. The biggest challenge that my office had for this property was the stormwater management. Back on March 2nd of 2021, the DEP released new stormwater management regulations in which a standard site doesn't just have a single detention basin and pipes running to it anymore. They limited the amount of drainage area to these type of basins to 2.5 acres. And they require green infrastructure. And they want a lot of disconnected impervious, meaning they don't want just to have an inlet of water running through it. They want it to run through grass, et cetera. It slows the water down. It allows water to percolate into the ground and it basically helps reduce the rate of runoff from the site. So because we are increasing impervious coverage by over 1/4 of an acre for the site, and we are disturbing over an acre of property, we are classified as a major development for stormwater management. And when you're classified as a major development, there's 3 criteria that you must meet. Rate of runoff, which is how quickly the water leaves the site, water quality, TSS removal or total suspended solids removal rate, and lastly is groundwater recharge, meaning the volume of water that percolates into the ground today on site must be met or exceeded in the future. So we utilize the combination of bioretention swales, porous pavement, and manufactured treatment devices around the entire property, in between each of the 2 buildings, buildings A and B, on the perimeter, in which these allow water to percolate down, get picked up by an underdrain, eventually make its way through a collection system and discharge out to a constructed wetlands being located up at the northeast corner. Now, the combination of all of these green infrastructure techniques that we're utilizing between the buildings, along with the constructed wetlands, that provides us to reduce the rate of runoff for up to and including a 100-year storm. And it also allows us to provide a 90% TSS removal rate for water quality, where 80% is required by regulation. So we're exceeding what is required for a water quality standpoint. In terms of the groundwater recharge, based off of the geotech soil testing, there was virtually no recharge occurring on site today. All of the tests show that the ground was very impermeable with very little recharge, with the exception of just to the north of building A. So we concentrated a couple of these green infrastructure techniques up to the north of building A to allow a little bit of recharge to meet that requirement based on the borough, county, and state requirements. Since I had mentioned the geotech and testing, I just want to put on the record, there is going to be no dynamic compaction being utilized for construction, not for the buildings, not for the roads, et cetera. Just want to make sure that is put on record. For the utilities, sewer, water, telephone, electric, and gas are all located within Main Street to provide service to this facility. We are proposing gravity lines from each of the office components out to an existing 12-inch sewer main out on Main Street. And the 12-inch water main in Main Street is going to be tapped at both of the 2 intersections. It's going to loop around the 2 center buildings, provide fire service to all 3 buildings. And then we're also going to run an extension underneath the railroad. And I can put that on the exhibit to the south, underneath the railroad, and interconnect with the system located on Lakeview Drive. That's going to provide adequate and safe fire protection, not only for this, but it's going to increase pressure and volume for the surrounding areas and interconnect both of those systems that don't combine today. We are proposing LED lights throughout the entire development. We have 99 freestanding lights. They are mounted at 30 feet high. They were downward pointing fixtures, 226 watt fixtures. And along with those, we are also proposing 50 building mounted fixtures. They're mounted at 29 feet high, again, 226 watt fixtures. This provides a 0.5 foot candle minimum throughout the entire development, which allows for safe pedestrian and vehicular access throughout the entire site. We are proposing 0 foot candle light level at all of the property lines, with the exception of the 2 driveways that need to be lit up for safety. We are meeting the redevelopment ordinance in terms of landscaping requirements, including a 150-foot wide landscape buffer along the westerly property line and a 100-foot wide landscape buffer along the northerly access road. The westerly buffer is going to be made up of a triple row of evergreen plantings, tree heights of 8 to 10 feet at planting, along with a mix of deciduous and some shrubs for some of the under canopy area. Along the north, we're going to do a double row of evergreen plantings. They're going to be directly behind the existing vegetation that exists on site on Main Street. The existing trees along Main Street are going to remain, with the exception of anything that needs to be removed for the entrance, the 2 entrances, and any minimal widening for the sidewalk along Main Street. The rest of the trees, et cetera, along Main Street are all going to remain. Within the development, it's a pretty standard landscaping plan 2 shade trees at each of the islands. We jazzed up the entrances off of Main Street with some fountain grasses to give it a little more of a color and look to it. In total, we are proposing 2,043 trees, 3,777 shrubs, and 2,882 ground cover, which is like switch grass and fountain grasses on site. This also includes the street trees located along Main Street that are being planted at 40 feet on center along that 5-foot wide sidewalk. The plans didn't indicate any signage to be proposed, but the applicant is going to meet the redevelopment ordinance in terms of having 1 monument sign located at each of the 2 driveways. The signs will be no more than 10 feet high and no more than 50 square feet max to meet the requirements, and set back a minimum of 15 feet off of the right-of-way. In terms of outside agency approvals, we require Middlesex County Planning Board. We require any borough departments, including fire, police, and soil erosion from the borough, because we are disturbing over 5,000 square feet. We will require a Conrail utility crossing permit for the water line extension. And lastly, we require DEP approvals, including flood hazard, individual permit due to the widening and extension of the culvert, a wetlands general permits for a couple of the isolated wetlands that exist on site, a treatment works approval, which is a sanitary sewer extension based on the flow from these 3 buildings. And lastly, a water extension permit from the DEP, again, for the length of piping that we're proposing. Lastly, I've had an opportunity to review the comments and recommendations made by the board's professionals, the August 17, 2022 CME letter, and the August 12, 2022 letter from Michael Fowler Associates. And based on the site plan and my testimony, we have a traffic engineer that can address the comments in the CME letters for traffic, but the applicant is willing to make and agree to all of those comments in both of those letters.
So let me just repeat that for, other than for section G1 under the technical comments dealing with the design waiver for the internal sidewalks, and section H, which Mr. Desario will discuss, the applicant will comply with all of the technical requirements set forth in Mr. Cornell's review letter.
Correct. And also Michael Fowler Associates. Yes, correct. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Questions? Okay. Anything?
Mr. Chairman, it's good to hear that the applicant's engineer is going to comply. The report is very lengthy. There are a lot of technical issues that we need to go through and have addressed. With regard to the storm drainage, conceptually, we agree with what's proposed. We just need more information to verify it's going to comply with the borough standards. A lot of the other conditions we talked about, changing the sound barriers from a wood material to a concrete material, he's agreed to. There's comments in here about vibration studies during the work to make sure there's no impacts on the offsite residents. He's agreed to go through and take care of that. There's comments in here about verifying adequate downstream capacity for the sewer system, adequate fire flow for the water system. He's agreed to go through and take care of those items. And also our report talks about the tree replacement ordinance. There's calculations that we have some questions about how they were done, but he's agreeing to comply with our recommendations and meet all the requirements of the tree preservation ordinance.
Correct.
So it's good to hear that all the items that we have, even though it's a very lengthy report, those are the major issues and he's agreeing to address those. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Do you have anything? Any questions or anything?
I want to testimonies all given by all the professionals to see if there's any questions that aren't covered in my report. Some other than comments that you'll address. Sometimes I have a question that maybe has a little bit of an answer that needs to be given.
No.
Thank you.
Call your next.
Mr. Alfieri, I'm not sure whether you want me to just.
Yes, please proceed. Please proceed with your testimony. We'll hold the public portion at the end.
Thank you. Mr. Daniel? Excuse me?
Good evening. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
First name is Scott, Scott. Last name is Daniel, Daniel.
And if you wouldn't mind, please providing your qualifications for the board.
Sure. I am a registered architect in the state of New Jersey. I am the Director of Architecture for Ware Malcolm. I have 35 years experience in the profession as an architect. Bachelor's of Architecture from NJIT. And again, I'm a licensed architect in New Jersey, New York, Maryland, and Pennsylvania.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept his credentials.
Second.
Please proceed.
Thank you. What I'd like to start with is rendering of building A. That was previously marked as A14, correct? Yes, this is A14, exhibit A14. And what this depicts is the configuration of the building at the entrance. Building A, the large building, which is 852,650 square feet. As discussed earlier, this is a cross-dock configuration. And as far as the materials go with the building, we will be utilizing a precast concrete panel, fully insulated. We will also be utilizing a glazing system that is double glazed, low E for energy conservation. With this, we'll utilize a storefront framing system, some metal panel to accentuate the entrance, and a canopy to also bring you a greater entry into the building. The architecture of the building is inherently monolithic for this type of building. So to counteract that, we use a combination of colors. We're using gray colors. As you can see, it's a white, a medium color gray, and a darker gray to give you some dynamic in the elevation. We also utilize vertical members in the panels to express more of the breaking up of the metal side. What we tried to do here, and our aim was to not so much make it look like a industrial building, but more an office space. And we have 3 buildings on this piece of property. So we wanted it to be more of a campus type of feel. And you can see that in the site plan that Mr. Oman showed to you earlier. So each of the buildings will be configured using the concrete panels. Also, it'll be a concrete slab on grade. And the interior structure will be steel columns, steel girders, open web joists, metal ceiling panels, fully insulated on top with a single ply membrane. The structure itself will be designed so that in the fact that the tenant or the owner decides that they want to utilize solar panels on the roof, it'll be able to carry that weight also. Each 3 of the buildings will be configured this way, and they'll have the same look to keep that campus type of feel, so that it kind of becomes part of the environment within the campus itself. As far as energy, we will utilize LED lighting on the inside. We also have a series of clear story windows to let in as much light as possible in between the racking that you can see. And again, it'll be fully insulated, and it'll meet and exceed the energy code for New Jersey. We've also provided some elevations and floor plans, correct? Yeah, what I'll do now, I'd like to bring up
A4, which is the large building, building A.
So you have exhibits 8, 13.
Yes.
Make sure you testify into the microphone. We have a portable one available.
This one?
Okay.
You have exhibits marked, pre-marked, 8-3 through 8-13, which are floor plans and elevations, correct?
That's correct.
But you're only going to provide a typical elevation and floor plans because the board can, rather than go through all of the exhibits, which are relatively the same. Would you agree?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through the larger building. Just to let you know, the other buildings are configured with the same materials, same type of construction. They're just a little bit smaller. Okay, building A, which is the larger building, which is over the 800,000 square feet, is actually the dimensions of the building are 1,550 linear feet on the long side and 550 feet on the short side. What we utilize is a bay system that goes with a typical racking system. And on the north to south axis, those bays are 50 feet on the inside. This is a cross dock configuration. So each of where the docks are, that's called the speed bay, and those are 60 feet. From the east to west, we were utilizing a 56-foot bay system. And what that does is it provides aisles for the forklifts to go up and down with greater efficiency. We, as discussed earlier, we had shown that we can break this building up into multi-tenants. We show here where we would say the best location for the offices are on the corners. That's typically how these buildings are structured. And as you saw in the rendering, each of those will have a feature on the corner for an entrance.
So A4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
You can use your microphone.
Yes.
A4 is the floor plan of the larger building.
That's correct.
And if you could just show us A3, which is, I think, the elevation.
A3? No,
Well, we have A3, A4. Okay. A3 is the same site plan that Mr. Coleman presented. Okay. So A4 and then A5 would be the elevations for building A, correct? That's correct. And then it would be fair to say that the other exhibits are typical of those as well. And we're going to make them part of the record. And they are part of the record, but you would agree that they are fairly typical of what you're talking about with respect to building A.
yes, they're almost identical. And as I said earlier, they're just smaller in size. That's fine. So what we're looking at here is the top is the east elevation, which shows just the entire elevation, the length of it, how it's broken up. Each end has the office space, which is a different color, it's a different texture. We utilize the metal panel at the corners, the glazing wall, the storefront, and the entrance canopy for the entrance for the employees. We utilize a darker color on the bottom to give it more of a pedestal, and the lighter color on top, so it accentuates the verticality of the building. The elevation on the bottom, where it says A5, that is the east-west elevation. So as you can see, we also play with the height of the building to give it a little more character, break it up a little bit, and add to the architecture of the building. This also takes into account the slope of the roof and the drainage of the water, which drains to each of the long sides of the building.
In terms of signage, you heard Mr. Bowman talk about the fact that we would fully comply with the town, with the redevelopment plans sign requirements, correct?
Correct.
And they will be internally illuminated signs?
They'll be internally illuminated sign, yes.
That's all I have. You have that, is there an A6 that, with respect to building A?
Yes, there is an A6. A6. A6 is pretty identical to A5. It's just the other side of the building, and that is the south side of the building also. So it's identical to the other exhibit.
We have nothing further for Mr. Daniel, unless the board has any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Anything, Jack?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My last witness is Dan Desario, traffic consultant.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Certainly. Dan, last name is Desario, Disario.
Can you please provide your qualifications for the board?
Certainly. Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Temple University, Master of Science in Transportation Engineering from NJIT, licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, and I've been accepted as an expert in traffic engineering before hundreds of boards throughout New Jersey.
Chairman, I can make a motion to accept his credentials.
Thank you. No, second? Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was going to add that I grew up in Perth Amboy, 1 block away from my warehouse. I currently live in South Brunswick near Exit 8A, directly across from Coca-Cola and L'Oreal warehouse. And I've worked on close to 1 billion square feet of warehousing throughout North America in the last 10 years. With that, respectfully, as the board's aware, we submitted a traffic study dated August 4th, 2022. I'd be happy to discuss any details of that study, but as our attorney has respectfully submitted to you, really at this stage, in terms of the site plan review, the board should be interested in understanding that safe and efficient site access is being provided as part of this project. I can tell you that is indeed the case. You heard from the site engineer that as part of this development, which again complies with the redevelopment plan, access will consist of 2 driveways along Main Street on the south side, directly opposite of Kimball Drive West and Kimball Drive East. As part of those 2 access points, the applicant is also providing improvements to Main Street. The applicant will be widening Main Street to provide left turn lanes in both directions at Kimball Drive East intersection, as well as the Kimball Drive West intersection. So there will be left turn lanes where none exist today, so that the residents that live along both Kimball Drive West and East will have a left turn lane when they're proceeding in the eastbound direction to turn into their development. And there will be westbound left turn lanes at both of the site driveways, again, opposite Kimball Drive West and Kimball Drive East, to serve site traffic turning into this proposed development. In addition, Main Street between Kimball Drive East and West will be widened to provide 15-foot wide travel lanes and 11-foot wide shoulders. The Kimball Drive East intersection, where our site driveway is coming in, will also have a acceleration lane so that traffic that's turning out of this site and heading east on Main Street will have a acceleration lane in order to do that. In addition, the applicant's proposing to install a traffic signal at the Kimball Drive East intersection. That signal will not only serve Kimball Drive East, but also the easterly side driveway as part of this development. The redevelopment plan does call for a traffic signal at the Kimball Drive West and our westerly site driveway intersection. We have coordinated with the county, and the county has made a determination that a traffic signal is not warranted at the present time for that intersection. Quite frankly, traffic signal warrants are largely driven, no pun intended, by the amount of traffic coming out of the minor streets. There's not enough traffic right now coming out of Kimball Drive West to warrant that signal. In addition, there's not enough traffic projected coming out of our westerly driveway in the future to warrant a traffic signal. So what the applicant is proposing and what the site engineer had testified to is, as part of this development, all the underground equipment that a traffic signal requires, so junction boxes, underground conduit that would cross over Main Street, would be installed by this application as part of this development. If and when such time volumes reach a level that a signal is warranted in the future, the applicant would install that signal at Kimball Drive West and our westerly side driveway. Now, we've had discussions with your engineer. One of the comments in his review letter is that a request to post a performance bond for that traffic signal at Kimball Drive West, and the applicant is agreeable to that. In addition, the request by Mr. Cornell was to provide an updated analysis after building number 2 is occupied and operating, to determine if at that time the additional traffic would reach a level where a traffic signal would be warranted at the Kimball Drive West intersection. The applicant is agreeable to that request. There's also a request by Mr. Cornell to do another analysis after building 3 is occupied and operating, to determine if at that time a traffic signal is warranted at Kimball Drive West. And if it is, the applicant will put it in. If it is not, the applicant will post a performance bond. And the applicant's respectfully requesting that that bond end 10 years after the CO for the last building is issued. So during those 10 years, there will be opportunities to, again, evaluate whether traffic signal or whether a traffic signal is warranted based on the future volumes that exist. So again, we would update a study after building 2 is occupied. If we don't hit the warrants, then we will do another study after building 3 is occupied. And if we don't warrant a traffic signal, then the applicant will post a bond that will run 10 years after the CO is issued for building 3. I will respectfully submit to the board, the applicant desires to put both signals in now. It's to their advantage to have basically 2 traffic signals at their front door serving their site. But the county, rightly so, wants the warrants to be met in order to authorize installation of a traffic signal, and we're just not there yet for Kimball Drive West. We are there for Kimball Drive East, but we are not there for Kimball Drive West. But as soon as we are, hopefully, the applicant will put that signal in, or you'll have the performance bond running for 10 years after building 3. With respect to on-site circulation, you heard from the site engineer, completely compliant with the redevelopment plan requirements as amended for the reduction of the dock doors as it relates to trailer parking spaces as submitted by him earlier this evening. All the trailer parking, all of the truck courts, all of the car parking have been designed in accordance with current standards and will provide safe and efficient circulation throughout the site. The proposed parking, some of it is proposed to be banked, some of it is proposed to be constructed at the time that each of the buildings are constructed. The parking complies with the redevelopment plan. Quite frankly, it's in excess of what the redevelopment plan requires. And that's why the applicant is proposing some of the parking to be banked. And if a specific tenant needs that additional parking, then the applicant would construct it. So in conclusion, we have a completely conforming plan as it relates to the use, the traffic as detailed in the traffic study submitted to this board concludes that the access is adequate. We are proposing the improvements along Main Street as well as the traffic signal at Kimball Drive East.
Can you,
No.
can you touch on any restriction on the truck turning and stuff?
Yes, the applicant right now is not pursuing any truck turning prohibition as it relates to the proposed driveways. I will tell you, and we've had these discussions, my understanding is trucks are prohibited for both Kimball Drive East and Kimball Drive West right now. Talking with your engineer, we can supplement the plan to reinforce that truck prohibition so that no trucks could go straight across from either driveway onto Kimball Drive East or Kimball Drive West. We don't have any issue with that. We can add striping and signage to that effect. I will tell you, I envision that the tenants that are likely to occupy these buildings will probably have port-related businesses and will rely on Port Elizabeth, Port Newark, Port Elizabeth for a lot of their truck activity, if not all of their trucking activity. So I would envision, and we anticipate, that the majority, if not all the trucks, would be oriented to and from the north. And as it relates to this specific site and this development, the trucks would rely on Main Street extension to get from the Route 9 and Route 35 corridors to travel between those corridors in this site, both coming and going. I know there was a lot of discussion during the redevelopment plan process. I know the public had concerns, particularly with respect to Ernston Road. I can tell you, and this was a comment in Mr. Cornell's letter, we do not need to rely on Ernston Road at all for our trucks. If the borough were inclined to pursue a truck prohibition along Ernston Road, this applicant would support that. I can tell you, though, there is a process that has to be followed with respect to prohibiting trucks on a public road. DOT has a process that you have to follow that basically requires there to be an existing truck issue or problem with a specific road. Now, I'm not aware of any issues with respect to Ernston Road and having a truck issue, other than the fact that, yes, people live along Ernston Road. They don't want to see any trucks, and I understand that. But Ernston Road itself, as everyone knows, very wide road, can easily accommodate trucks. Not that they're desirous because of the residential nature of quite a bit of Ernston Road, but nonetheless, I'm not aware of any problem today with respect to trucks on Ernston Road. But if the borough were to pursue trying to prohibit trucks along Ernston Road, this applicant would support that and have no issue with that. Again, this development is going to rely on Main Street extension as the truck route to get trucks to and from the ports and this site.
I just have just some conclusions that I'd like you to confirm. You've read the redevelopment plan, have you not?
Yes.
And in terms of circulation improvements, I'm just going to read them and you just confirm that our plan either complies or doesn't. Main Street shall be widened along the property frontage to provide dedicated turning lanes at each proposed intersection / driveway.
Complies.
Signalized intersections shall be provided to create full movement intersections at driveways proposed opposite Kimball Drive West and Kimball Drive East.
We comply with Kimball Drive East, and we will comply with Kimball Drive West if and when a signal is warranted in the future.
Truck traffic shall not be permitted access from the site from the west or exit the site traveling west on Main Street towards downtown Centerville. All truck traffic shall enter the site from the east and exit the site to the east toward Main Street Extension, Route 9 and Route 35. Turning movement shall be restricted in a manner acceptable to the board engineer.
We will comply with that. I'm not sure if the site plan shows signage and striping to that effect, but we can supplement the plans to implement that prohibition such that all trucks would come to and from the east.
And you've had an opportunity to review Mr. Cornell's section H under his technical review comments entitled traffic.
Yes.
And we can comply with all of the items 1 through 9 in that report. correct?
Yes,
With respect to the shuttle service, we'll make good faith efforts to do that. It's not a mandate, but we will make good faith efforts to do that.
yes. And the applicant's position with respect to the shuttle service is that they will work with the future tenants of the development. And if there is a need and a demand for shuttle service, the applicant will work with the tenants as well as the borough to craft a specific service that addresses those needs.
You've been a traffic engineer for how long?
I started working in September 92 at now defunct, Shore de Palma.
Okay, and so you are aware of the general rules with respect to traffic generation on a permitted use with no variances, correct?
Yes,
As a matter of law, this board really can't deny a site plan is based upon traffic generation on the roadway system as long as the site is permitted, because that's an issue for the governing body through the redevelopment plan, correct?
yes,
The board does have jurisdiction over whether exits and entrances are safe and efficient, and you have opined that they are, correct?
yes,
And you've also opined that the applicant has agreed to certain off-track improvements, which is also allowed under the PRB enterprise case, correct?
yes.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
I got a question on the left-hand turning lane coming from the Main Street extension. All right, looking at the plan, it seems to be about 100 feet long or in that vicinity.
Yes,
Like, what I'm concerned with is tractor trailers coming, like you said, from the port from Main Street extension. And then you're only going to fit 3 tractor trailers in there trying to make this left-hand turn, which in turn would cause a problem with traffic backed up on Main Street. I don't know the protocol or how you determine the length of a turning lane. So we wouldn't have that problem. If you could educate me on that, I'd like.
certainly. It's based on the traffic analysis. So we
Mhm.
run analysis of that intersection and we calculate how long the queue would be for that left turn lane.
Mhm.
And we're working with the county to fine tune that design. If that
Mhm.
left turn lane needs to be extended, we can take a look at that. But I am confident the left turn lane as shown on the site plans will accommodate that demand.
Okay, and the reason I asked that question is because the intersection of Bordentown Avenue and Ernston Road years ago, okay, in my opinion, the turning lanes are too short because the problem still exists after all the money was spent. But anyway, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So the applicant is seeking 24/7 operation. Now, having said that, I can tell you the likelihood that you get a tenant in here that runs 24/7 is extremely low. Most of the warehouse tenants that have occupied most of the warehousing in the last 10, 15 years in our state do not run 24/7. I have a lot of developers with several buildings in their portfolios, and I've asked that same question of them. One in particular, they're called MRP. They haven't done anything in Saraville, but they're more Burlington County, and they have like 100 buildings in their portfolio. One of their tenants runs 24/7.
How many employees do you think are be working at the complex? In the 24-hour period?
It's gonna be really tenant specific and dependent. When I'm asked that question, I really, with all due respect and respectfully submit to you, the amount of employees that can work at this development or in any of these individual buildings is really going to be limited by the amount of car parking that is being provided. So I think the board can take some comfort in knowing that the maximum number of employees on the site at any given time is only going to equate to the amount of car parking that's provided. These modern warehouse buildings have so much technology and mechanization inside them. You'd be surprised. It doesn't take a large head count in order to run these modern warehouses. I will tell you, in full disclosure, I've done a ton of work with Amazon all over the country. So Amazon is a separate operator than 99% of the other types of tenants that would come into this kind of development.
Is there any plan to have security at the complex?
I can't answer that.
And how about the lighting issues from the complex? If it's running 24/7, is it going to create any issues for the housing across the street?
I'd have to defer to the site engineer, but the testimony that he had given was the lighting is compliant with the requirements of the borough. There will be some higher lighting levels at the two driveway intersections with Kimball driving east and west, but that is needed because of the intersections. You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you, sir. I know there was a back and forth that you folks had with some of the residents who are concerned. I know that some folks are here this evening as well. So I just wanted to confirm some of the things that you guys had agreed to in conversations with residents, just to make sure that that is transparent. The approved plans call for exits opposite Kimball Drive East and West. All traffic, both car and truck from the complex, should be prohibited from using either Kimball Drive East or Kimball Drive West, which are residential streets. Your team said that you agreed with and supported that request. Is that correct?
Yes,
Perfect. Would you agree to make that a condition of approval?
yes,
And then we also discussed that your leases would require tenants to enforce preferred routes, right? And prohibitions to keep trucks off of local roads. You also agreed with that recommendation?
yes. And I meant to say that in my direct testimony, so thank you. Yes,
And so you would be willing to make that a condition of approval as well?
yes.
Let's see, also addressed was turning left onto Main Street, right? So that's a big concern. I know a lot of residents have. So trucks should be prohibited from turning left. The response that was given was that Main Street is a county road, and thusly the borough and developer could not make such a commitment. Insofar as you are able to striping, painting, encourage all of your tenants to turn right and not left. I know that the traffic study that I read and the response that you've given here says the amount of projected traffic going west is minimal. I would like to hear a little bit more of an assurance that traffic will be directed to only travel right and not left.
I think what we stipulated to earlier is that all the trucks from this development would be prohibited from making a left turn onto Main Street. However, car traffic, we are not stipulating to that same prohibition. Our opinion is cars should be allowed to make both lefts and rights out of this development. There was a request to not allow cars and trucks to proceed across to Kimball Drive East or Kimball Drive West, and we stipulate that we will have that prohibition. But in terms of car traffic, cars will be allowed to make both left turns and right turns into and out of this development.
But trucks will not be. As a condition of approval, trucks will be prohibited from turning left out of your complex.
Correct.
Let me just interject. That is consistent with what the redevelopment plan says. There's no prohibition on cars making left turns. It's trucks. All the trucks are going to be directed to the Main Street extension.
I think it's important to be said out loud here, so.
And the plans do show that there are signs on the plan saying left turn cars only. So there are things that are incorporated into the plan to reinforce that.
Okay, so as a condition of approval, then trucks are prohibited from turning left.
Yes, sir.
Those are the questions that I have. Thank you.
Just had a follow-up question. You talked about Ernst Road. Is there going to be any prohibition in the leases or the truckers going on Ernst Road? Because Ernst Road is an issue, and especially with, the transportation depot the borough is going to be building. If you're ever on Ernst Road around 3 o'clock on a school day, it is impossible. And now we're going to have a lot more bus traffic on Ernst Road. Is there a way to make sure that the truck drivers don't use Ernst Road as a way to get onto Route 9 and 35 and do take the access into Main Street?
So what the applicant is respectfully submitting is that they will have provisions in the leases with each of the tenants directing them to direct their trucks to use Main Street extension to come to and from the site. I know one of the residents who's been very vocal, he's in the audience today or tonight, pointed out that there is a limitation, a height limitation with the bridge that comes over Main Street, just east of Main Street extension. That's 13 foot 2 inches. trucks are legally allowed a maximum height of 13.6 in New Jersey. So I think just by virtue of that bridge, that overhead or the overpass will limit trucks. But yes, the applicant will work with the leases for the tenants to direct them that Main Street extension is the truck route for this development.
Is that going to be a condition to?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Else? Questions?
I have a question about the walls, not necessarily traffic, but would that, how tall are they? Would that help in any way with lighting for the residents?
The sound walls are 18 feet in height, but the lighting calcs show there are 0 foot candles at all of the property lines, with the exception of the 2 driveways.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, the attorney, Mr. Muller had touched a little bit on my comment G1, just dealing with hours of operation, number of employees, kind of tenants you might have in the building. I know the tenants may not be chosen at this point, but can you look at my comment G1 and see if you can lighten us to any of those issues?
From your report.
My report,
Yeah.
please, yes.
Dan, if you can come up again. It's okay.
In the whole.
So I don't have your report in front of me, Mr. Fowler. Are you talking about just typical operations?
Yes,
and-
just-
And tenants, yeah. So the applicant has no deals with any tenants right now. So to give you specifics, we can't do that. But what I can tell you, just generally speaking, with all the warehouse work I've done, if the board's familiar with the warehouses around 8A or down in Cranberry, what is likely going to be the types of tenants, and I'll give you 2 that come to mind because we've done research counts at these 2 warehouses as part of a big warehouse development that I was involved in Cranberry. So on Station Road in Cranberry, there's a Home Depot warehouse and there's a Audi VW warehouse. The Audi VW warehouse supplies auto parts to dealerships and repair shops. The Home Depot warehouse basically warehouses goods that end up at Home Depot stores in the general area. Those warehouses are quite large. They're on the order of the large building that's on this plan. They, relatively speaking, generate very little traffic. They run very low head counts, even though they're large buildings. Typically, these types of tenants that would come to this kind of development, most are gonna run one shift, probably starts around 6:30 in the morning and ends around 3:30 in the afternoon. Some of them will go with a second shift that'll start up around 3:30, maybe 4, and then run till about 10:30 at night. Very little, if any, of the tenants will run 24/7. Now, that's not to say that can't happen, but the likelihood is very low based on my experience working on tons of warehousing projects all over the state.
In terms of the merchandise that he also had said, we're prohibited under the terms of the redevelopment plan from storing hazardous substances, explosives, things like that, correct?
Yes,
So there will be, if you want to put that as a condition, there will be no hazardous substances because it's in the plan. We won't, none of the space will be used for that purpose, correct?
correct. And frankly speaking, this applicant's not interested in a tenant or tenants that would want to store hazardous materials at this site.
These aren't being proposed as fulfillment centers, are they?
Not at this time, no.
Is there typically security for these 24/7-hour operations? I mean, I'm concerned that you're putting in a pretty big complex and it's going to be open all night and kids might go there. Is that ever part of the equation?
My experience working with developers and tenants is that, yes, there is security at the buildings. The building may not be open and functioning, but there's usually security at these buildings all the time. Because of the inventory and the value of what's inside the buildings, they do have security.
Is it a fair statement, Mr. Desario, that the tenants themselves will have their own security?
Yes, and that's what I was alluding to with the question, that the tenants will provide their own security inside the buildings.
And based upon your experience, there's very little likelihood, although it's not impossible, but we can't put as a condition, but there's very little likelihood that an Amazon type operation would come here because of the parking, correct?
Yes, and it was asked whether it's going to be a fulfillment center or not. And I can tell you, when people ask that question, it always harkens back to Amazon, right? Everyone thinks about Amazon. I worked on the one in Robbinsville, full disclosure. I know that had issues when it first opened for a whole host of reasons that we corrected. But I can tell this board and the public, I do not foresee Amazon coming to this development and doing a deal here because the parking is not sufficient. If Amazon were to want to come here, it's a high likelihood that the applicant or Amazon would be back before this board seeking amended site plan approval to change the buildings, add more car parking, add more trailer parking. So this applicant is bound, and the board's aware, Main Street's a county road. So the county also has oversight and review and approval of this development. We are going to be bound by the county to the traffic study that has been submitted to you, as well as the county. If a tenant wants to generate more traffic than what is shown in the traffic study, the county is going to bring us back before them to do updated evaluations and studies for the higher traffic loads. And quite frankly, if a tenant does come in here and want to generate more traffic, that would be a good thing because it would help justify and hopefully warrant the signal at Kimball Drive West. You're welcome.
No question. Part of integrating, I think, successfully into a community is appreciating its history. You had talked about potentially needing to remove trees in the front where the entrances are. Those trees be relocated to another place on campus, or would those trees be completely taken out? And I ask that because I am sitting on this planning board as part of the Saraville Environmental Commission, so I'm bound to ask these questions as well.
And you know, I grew up in Perth Amboy, so it was always Saraville, Perth Amboy on Thanksgiving Day. So yes, I know the history of Saraville.
It's highly unlikely that those trees will be replanted. New trees will be planted on site in place of those areas.
Okay, and you do the tree bank ordinance, right, is 2 for 1, correct? So for every 2 parking spots you have on site, you need to replant a tree,
Correct.
and you far exceed that, right? The plan is to have over 2,000 trees, I believe you said.
Yes, we're going to work with CME's office on making sure that if we don't have enough trees on site, we're either going to add the trees or contribute to the tree fund for the borough.
And let me just clarify, in addition to replacing the trees that come down, there's formulas. On top of that, it's 2 per 1 for parking. So
parking.
there's a
Correct.
requirement plus the other combined together. He's going to comply with that.
Perfect.
Anybody else have any questions?
I heard that 3:30 shift change and kind of got concerned because as it is from school, my kids come home an hour late. I feel like Saraville shuts down during school dismissal. I don't know what can be done about it, but that 3:30 shift change was just like, wait, what? Especially because you said as many parking spots as there are, that's how many employees that there will be.
That would limit how many employees there could be.
So-
Typically, there's give or take 500 spaces that are going to be constructed, another few hundred that would be banked. Typically, the parking lots are set up for tenants that do have 2 shifts so that you can only have half the amount of employees as a
Mhm.
number of parking spaces because you want to have enough for that to accommodate that shift. I can tell you in my personal experience, a lot of times when tenants come to a new area, like what we're talking about this evening, if they find that, yeah, it is very difficult for our employees to get here at 3:30 if we're running a second shift, more often than not, they'll change their operations to move that shift change outside of, say, a school peak. That's creating some issues for their employees to get to the site on time.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, anybody else?
Motion to.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion to open to the public. Make a motion. Second.
All in favor? We'll start with in-person residents first.
If there's anybody from the public in person that would like to make comments or questions, please come up to the mic. We're going to have anybody on the Zoom provide requests once the in-person is done.
Limited to 5 minutes.
Yep.
And depending on the number of individuals, we want to give everybody a chance to speak. So we would like to limit the time for questions and comments to 5 minutes per person, just so we have enough time. We have an 11 o'clock cutoff. Can you please, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's your mic. Please state your name.
RITTENHOUSE, Chairman, Cerebral Shade Tree Commission. I'm also going to be talking as a resident of Main Street Townhomes. But first, just the recent comment, Mr. Cornell, that you made. I believe if I read the plans, there are approximately 700 trees that are going to be removed. Was that in the plans? Did I read that correctly?
I just want to clarify, we had a number of comments in our report about how their calculations were done, so I don't want to say that the number on the plan is correct. They're going to have to comply with the ordinance requirements. We've got to work through that.
All right, I would like, as a condition of the approval, that the number of trees that you determine, that they pay the appropriate fine and don't go back or the appropriate amount to the tree bank. But if they don't, and we have to fine them, that they don't go back and appeal as they did the last time when they illegally took down the trees. And the $95,000 fine was reduced to $25,000. I would like an assurance that they're going to comply with the tree ordinance, apply with the putting money into the tree bank, such as the new development at Arsenal, put in money up ahead.
Chairman, if I might answer.
Sure.
I think we have two issues. There was an issue that you're referring to that had to do with the removal of trees prior to a planning board approval. My understanding is that went to the court and somehow it was settled. I don't know the specifics of it, but that's not part of this application. What is shown on the plans submitted this evening, they're going to have to comply with the tree ordinance, whether it be planting on site to compensate or go through and making a contribution to the tree bank or a combination of both. So I
I
think.
just don't want to make, I just want to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I can't speak to the violation issue, but as far as the plan goes, that'll be a specific condition of approval that they have to comply with the ordinance requirements for the development of this property.
Thank you. Okay. As a resident, on the plan, from what I heard tonight, 3 tributaries coming into Burt's Creek. Now, Burt's Creek floods with just above normal rain. So you're going to now have 3 tributaries feeding into Burt's Creek. And that can endanger a minimum of 30 homes in Main Street Townhomes, the ones that are along the Kimball Drive east side. So I think something has to be done, and the ground where this is going to be built is solid ground, so it's not very porous. So yes, the part with it running through grass is excellent because that will slow down the water. But you've got those houses to consider, that you have a possibility that with 3 tributaries that are going to be man-made coming in are going to flood out these houses on Main Street Townhomes. So that's something I think needs to be looked at.
Mr. Chairman, I would maybe defer to the applicant's engineer because I don't know that the 3 tributaries is correct, but the applicant is bound by the state regulations and the borough regulations concerning stormwater management. They're not permitted to increase the runoff from the site. They've got to go through and provide detention on the site to retain that so they're not impacting the downstream system. And that's what's being proposed, but let Mr. Ullman clarify that further for you.
And Mr. Cornell summed it up perfectly. Just to clarify, the 3 tributaries exist today. We're eliminating the 3 tributaries in the main trunk from the easterly access road and loop road to Birch Creek is remaining.
And the amount of runoff that exists currently, you're not increasing. You're
We are reducing up to an 100-year storm as required by the borough requirements, the county requirements, and the state requirements.
Okay. On the traffic, the last time that this was proposed several years ago, the traffic study went from a C- to an F. I remember that. As far as, I'm very glad that they're going to propose that they want to put the light in at Kimball Drive West. However, I think that the governing body should petition the county to put that light in. The majority of the people living in Main Street townhouses go out west. They don't go out Kimball Drive East. So, and if they do start to, you're going to create a traffic jam within the development. You have Tutty Circle and you have the bulk of the houses of Main Street townhouses on the Kimball Drive West side. And also the other question in phase 1 is Kimball Drive West coming from the development going to be open at the same time phase 1 is complete.
Construction of the westerly driveway is part of phase 2
Okay, so they're only going to be coming out of Kimball Drive East
for phase 1.
for phase 1.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I might, let me just clarify about Kimball Drive West, because we agree with you, Mr. Rittenhouse. We have been on phone calls with the applicant and the county trying to get them to agree to install a traffic signal at Kimball Drive West. And you heard a lot of conditions that were recommended in our report concerning that. We've asked for warrant studies, not just now, but after a couple buildings are in operation to see if it justifies that signal. We've asked for warrant studies over that 10-year period after the 3rd building is occupied to try to justify getting that signal installed at the developer's expense. So we've attempted to do that already. We're going to continue to do that with the county. And we basically got the developer responsible for potentially putting that signal in as soon as it is warranted up to 10 years after that last building is occupied.
Okay, as far as the traffic coming from the west, I can't see how a person in one of those units can tell the trucks that they can't come through Sayreville from the west. And that's what was said tonight. I know I also can't see a truck driver coming out to that traffic light, watching the Woodbridge Township trucks, watching the steel company trucks, watching all the tractor trailers heading west. And he's sitting there saying, I can't turn? What do you mean I can't turn? And when he does, if he has to go to Plainsboro or down south to get to the turnpike, where is he going to go? He's got to go all the way up and out and around, you know, and get on the exit 10 instead of either exit 9 or 8. So I think that's something that's it's going to be tough to enforce with that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that the borough can tell you for sure that that potentially is not going to happen. But what we can say is that the redevelopment plan calls for all the trucks to be heading in the easterly direction. The access out of the site has a separate turn lane for trucks and an acceleration lane to get onto Main Street, heading in that easterly direction. There's signage throughout the site telling trucks that they can't go through and make a left turn onto Main Street. And there's going to be lease agreements that direct the tenants to have their drivers go in that direction.
I'm just talking about reality.
Understand?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lear, and your group for the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? In person? Seeing none, we can open it to the Zoom public.
To help keep the meeting as organized as possible, residents who wish to speak in one of the public portions are to press *9 to notify us that you wish to speak. At that time, we ask your name and address and be limited to a 5-minute comment period. So we do have one so far. Phone number 965.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, yes, that was me on the phone. Let me disconnect that. I'm sorry. Yes, hi, my name is Alan Didino. I'm an attorney with Griffin Alexander. We represent Main Street Homeowners
Can
Association.
you slow down? Can you slow down?
Certainly,
We can't hear you too clearly, so can you please state your name again?
certainly. My name is Alan Didino. I'm an attorney with Griffin Alexander, and we represent Main Street Homeowners Association, who is the next door, across the street neighbor from this, and I believe Mr. Rittenhouse is a resident who you just heard from. They had a few concerns that we would like to address today, or at least make heard, and be a part of the record. I understand there was a lot discussed, and I will try to keep my comments poignant. I've heard a lot about approval from the county. Is there any status as to where the county is in approving this? And I only say that because the main concern with Main Street as to the traffic light seems to be tied in with approval for development of the rest of the stretch of that Main Street there. And it seems that the construction is going to begin before that light is fully in place. So that timing doesn't seem to be entirely clear. And even from the documents that's been presented, the light is going to be constructed, it's being proposed, it's being considered, which we understand and approve, and it's been discussed, and Mr. Rittenhouse has addressed as well. And the expert, traffic expert has definitely addressed, and we duly appreciate all of those explanations. But can we get is there any clarification as to the time frame of that approval?
Mr. Chairman, I could just clarify, in the redevelopers agreement, it indicates that the signal has to be installed and operational before the first CO is issued for any of the buildings in the complex. So hopefully that'll answer your question.
So then no trucks will be going in and out before the light isn't constructed.
There will not be a CO issued for any building until this Kimball Drive East signal is operational.
Okay. I do appreciate that, the clarity as to the direction of the trucks. That was also a main concern for Main Street. The homeowners association, I know they had a lot of concerns about obviously their community and how it develops in the future. The only other thing that I think I would reiterate quickly is just the picture that was presented does present the barriers are blurred. And when you take away the blurred barriers, you see how close those homes are to that northeast corner, which is where the flood and water control mechanisms will go. And we do just encourage you to consider that the proximity to that, and that this large space is being condensed down to that one area. So that flooding is a definite real concern for that creek, which I understand has a very high water table. So as soon as that water incurs any water, it obviously raises quickly, which I'm sure you know. Second, as to another factor, has the length of the time that the lights will run be considered as to permit the trucks, more than one or two, to navigate the intersection?
The final operation of this traffic signal hasn't been completed yet, but obviously we will take that into account when we do the final design.
Is there any idea, given the intensity of this trucking operation, is there a general time frame? Is it a minute, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, something that would permit 5 or 10 trucks to run through?
Just slow down when you're speaking because we're trying to capture everything of record. Can
Certainly.
you please repeat your question?
Certainly. I was simply asking if there was a standard for this type of operation with this kind of intensity. Is it a 60-minute? Is it a 60-second? Is it a 90-second? What is usually applicable to permit the trucks to navigate this kind of intersection other than 1 or 2 at a time when it's only a 5 or 10-second light?
Well, there'll be a combination of a green arrow, because that's a requirement by Middlesex County. So both eastbound and westbound left turns will have a green arrow. And then that green arrow will come off, and then trucks and or cars can then make permitted left turns. So there will be sufficient time for trucks and cars to turn into this site at the easterly driveway at the new signal.
I was asking more about the length of the time of those lights.
Yeah, that hasn't been finalized. In terms of the cycle length and the specific green time, a portion to all the movements, that hasn't been finalized yet.
But the intensity of the intersection will be taken into consideration when that is factored in. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Very well.
You have anything further?
I do not believe so. I appreciate the board's time. I was just reviewing my notes. I didn't want to be redundant. I was trying to be specific with my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay, next resident, AZ.
Hello, I'm a resident of Main Street Home Association.
Please state your name. Please state your name for the record and address.
My name is Alina. I don't want to disclose my address.
Alina, can we please have your last name and spell it?
It's ZYL.
AZYL?
ZYL.
Thank you. You can proceed.
How noise will be regulated? Because right now, whatever manufacturers we have on site are not compliant with the noise.
As my client, Mr. Ullman indicated, that the ambient noise from Main Street is already exceeds the limitations, but this site will not add to or contribute any further because of the mitigation that's being proposed with the sound attenuation walls. So this site will meet state and local requirements with respect to noise or sound because of the attenuation walls.
And I have the second question. Will the property tax rate be revised because of the inconvenience the construction will cost to the resident of the association?
I didn't hear, I don't understand what she said.
Can you please
Will-
repeat your question?
Yes. Will be property tax rate revised because of the inconvenience the construction will cause?
Is the question, will property tax?
I think property tax rate wouldn't be before this board. That would not be something that we would. speak to.
Yeah, exactly. Property taxes are not something that are part of the planning board's jurisdiction. That would be something that you would raise with town council or the tax assessor and tax collector.
Okay.
Any further questions? Susan?
Hi, yes, my name is Susan Mansman. I also do not want to disclose my address. However, my
Please spell your
comment-
last name for the record.
Sure, Mansmann.
Thank you.
My question is regarding the traffic going down towards Lower Main Street. And more so with the amount of employees that are going to be engaged at the warehouse, as well as during the construction time. Anyone coming in from, say, the Route 18, is going to be coming up through Lower Main Street and coming through the developments, of which we do not have any lights past the one that is currently at the Senior Citizen Center. So how are we going to maintain for those individuals who either have to turn left or right out of the developments or out of just the local neighborhoods based on the influx of transportation due to individuals who are working at this location?
Consistent with the study that we did as part of the redevelopment plan process that established this site as being appropriate for warehousing development, we anticipate about 20% of the cars would be to and from the west along Main Street. And that was based on what's called a gravity model, looking at the people that work in the borough and where they originate from in terms of their places of residence based on the census data. So the overwhelming majority of car traffic from this development will be oriented to the Route 9 corridor, and 20% of the traffic in terms of the cars would be oriented to the west, so to and from the west along Main Street in the Route 18 corridor.
And will there be any additional reevaluation once fully occupied to potentially take a look at adding additional traffic signals along the lower Main Street area?
Not by this applicant, no.
Any further questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the Zoom? Please hit *9. Seeing that we have no further.
Just give it one more minute for them.
I'm on Zoom, but not on the phone, so I can't hit *9. May I be heard?
Please state your name and
Yes.
address.
Jim Robinson, 11 Burrell Square in Parlin.
Proceed.
Okay, I sent an email to the board, to the engineer, and to the applicant, and the applicant responded to most of my concerns. The one he said he did not agree with in his response was the no left turn, but my understanding from hearing what's going on tonight is a left turn for trucks, a left turn onto Main Street for trucks will be prohibited. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate that the leases will direct traffic to the Main Street extension, which is what Mr. Mako responded to me in his email. I appreciate that that's going to take place. I just want to comment on, I want to clarify something. The concern about Ernston Road certainly was for the benefit of the folks who live on Ernston Road, but it was also to keep trucks from using Ernston to get to Washington Road. So I think that ought to be noted. Okay. Now I do have one of the things that was not addressed previously, either tonight or in the email, was the trees on Main Street that will be removed. How wide a swath of trees will be removed for the turning lanes?
The dedication varies between 10 and 12 feet along the southerly side of Main Street. Doesn't mean that 10 to 12 feet of trees are being removed, but that is the width that we are extending the improvements.
Okay.
Once we determine what that is, we'll do a tree count, and that'll be included in the review by the board engineer to ensure that the applicant is meeting the tree replacement for this application.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that almost all of my concerns have been addressed.
Any other public from the Zoom? Please hit *9. No, nobody's hit.
Motion to close to the public? Second? All in favor? Opposed?
If I could just say a few closing words, and I'll leave it to the board. I thank you for your patience, members of the public, members of your professional staff, and for you for coming out and asking such appropriate and diligent and good questions. I don't want to repeat myself, but I will end this by saying we've spent quite a bit of time over the last few years working with your professional staff, working with the board, working with Sarah, working with the governing body to come up with a plan. We comply with all of the requirements. We need no variance relief. We need a minor interior design waiver, which I believe Mr. Cornell actually supports. But other than that, we are a compliant, fully compliant application, and we respectfully request your approval.
Thank you.
I would like to just go through, before the board makes a motion to approve or deny, just some of the conditions that were stated. So the board professional reports, it was testified that all of the comments and concerns would be addressed. Any outside agency approvals would be addressed. There would be traffic studies at certain demarcating points that would be provided, and a potentially the installation of a traffic light. There was also a condition that no trucks or cars onto Kimball. There was also no trucks making left-hand turns onto Main Street. The leases for the proposed tenants and tenants in the future will contain a preferred route for the trucks and a prohibition onto Ernston Road. There will be no hazardous substances stored on the site. And that's all of the conditions that I have.
Okay, one clarification. I think we're talking about Ernston Road. Can we include North Ernston Road too? Because I know that Mr. Robinson made a comment, I think he's right. If you're going into North Ernston, you're potentially making a right or left onto Washington. You can make a right toward the middle and high school during the peak of that traffic issue. So my request would be to include North Ernston too.
Does the applicant agree to comply? Thank you. So with that, does the board have a motion?
Motion to approve the conditions.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Roll call vote will be Mr. Allegra,
Yes.
Mr. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Blamar, Mr. Mueller,
Yes.
Councilman Onoha,
Yes.
Ms. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Pizzato. Okay.
Busy, yes, some of the things that we like or do not like, it's when you check every box that you are required to check. So
Chairman Davis.
Yes.
Application approved.
Thank you, members of the board. Thank you, members of the public.
Congratulations. Have a good evening.
What are we doing all this week?
I'll tell you what, they worked very, very hard. Excellent presentation. They worked very hard for many, many years.
We have not concluded.
This has been going on since 1980.
No, it shows you.
Guys, we have to continue, we have to finish up the meeting. This has been going on since 86, 87.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've gone through so many different phases of what they can do, what they can't do, houses. It's been a long, long.
Especially with the second light.
Yeah.
Yes.
The only thing that I'm concerned with is that, and they're.
we, prior to adjournment, if we could move.
We open it up again later, so.
Exactly. Too short. It's a nightmare.
You can see it right there.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, we'll open up after old business, new business. Okay, so old business, new business, administrative matters. We've received a Bernie, thank you.
Finish the meeting.
Proposal for Michael Fowler to the planning board with regard to provide a study report of block 446 lot 2 on Ernston Road if an appropriate area is designation or as a redevelopment area per resolution 2022-124. So everybody received that proposal. So we just need to either, Michael, do you want to?
You have anything to add to that, Mike?
Be the same as the last two I had done, just to do a study, make sure the site does qualify as a redevelopment area. Same format, but the same timing.
Like, we get a motion
Motion?
to accept that proposal?
The motion.
Second,
All in favor? Aye. Want to do a roll?
we'll do a roll call vote. Roll call on that proposal would be Mr. Allegra, Mr. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Blamar, Mr. Mueller, Councilman Onoha, Ms. Patel, Mr. Spizzato, Thank you. Chairman Davis.
Yes.
Great. So that proposal has been approved. Great. So we'll make a motion to open up to the public.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, open public.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So if there's anybody here,
From the public wish to speak?
okay, come on up. So we understand that you had some comments that you would like to make.
Yeah, about another development on,
Hold on one second. So I understand you have some comments that you'd like to make. We have everybody here from the applicants and the board is still here. So if you, any comments you want, feel free. Just state your name for the record.
my name is Eric Shemper, SHEMP. I'm talking about the, project going on Cheesequake.
Oh, okay.
You know,
So unrelated to this.
Not related to this.
All right, sorry about that.
No.
Unless you guys want to hang, feel free.
Okay. So, I'm not sure when they brought that up, but all one day I woke up and they started to clear 5,000 trees over there. And now they're already building the warehouse. But I'm here today, I can't stop what they're already doing because they're already building it. However, the road, they were supposed to build a road to Journey Mill Road out the back for that complex, which would enter into commercial, they could go to Washington or to Bordentown. But now I heard the builder said it's too much money, they're not gonna do it. So they're gonna just use Menacink and Cheesequake, which can't handle the truck traffic, and it's gonna go through residential neighborhoods. So I'm here, and I don't know who or I should be talking to. That road coming towards Washington on Menacink should be a 4-ton limit.
So that wouldn't necessarily be before this board.
Let me attempt to answer the residents' questions. The process you saw this evening for that application, the one you're talking about was known as the Arsenal Trade Center. It did the exact same thing. There was a redevelopment plan prepared for that property that talked about how it was going to be developed and how the traffic was going to be handled. This was approved as the first phase. So what's under construction is the first phase. They were not required to construct the road out to Journey Mill Road as part of the first phase. That's something that's got to be done as part of the next phase.
Okay.
They were required to submit applications to the state for permits for that roadway because there's a lot of wetlands, a lot of environmental constraints that they have to go through to be able to build the road. So they need permits from the DEP. So they're required to do that as part of this first phase that's under
You have the
construction.
handicap school over there too, you know. There's a lot of buses and stuff coming out, and I understand Sable is moving their bus garage over there. They're gonna be putting it on
Correct.
there.
The developer is prohibited from having trucks go on Minnesink Avenue. So all the trucks are going to be directed toward Bordentown Avenue. So the intersection of Cheesequake and Minnesink as it is now, it's a stop controlled intersection. That's going to be reconstructed. It's going to be a straight through roadway, but the trucks are all going to be heading toward Bordentown Avenue. And the developer is going to reconstruct the intersection of Bordentown Avenue, new signals,
Down by the
wider,
Quick Check, right?
by the quick check, wider turning lanes. So that's all part of his requirement.
So when the trucks are leaving the complex, you're not gonna be letting them go to a Menacink.
Correct. They're all going to Bordentown Avenue and you're going to have a new signal with new curb returns for
Okay.
wider truck turning movements.
And I know I'm late, I missed the meeting when they had for that, but are they putting any sound barriers up for that or no?
No sound barriers, but you mentioned trees being removed. They had to compensate the borough approximately $1.8 million into the tree bank. In addition to planting trees on the property, they made a payment for the removal of those trees as a condition of their approval.
I mean, you're running through the streets by my house. I live on Jensen Road, you know, they're all displaced. You know, it was bad enough before. Now with the building,
They are going to replant in order to build. There's a lot of earthwork that's taking place. You can see it driving by. All the hills that are there now is going to be leveled out. So there's a lot of earthwork. But once it's completed, they're going to be planting trees to compensate for
when are
what
they
came down.
expecting to start phase 2 or?
They haven't submitted any application yet for phase 2.
So how would I be notified by that? Just,
If your property's within 200 feet of, it's not, maybe keep track of your neighbors that might be,
Okay.
because they'll get a notice. But also, the whole process is going to have, it's going to have to go through the redevelopment agency. It's going to have to come to the planning board. So there'll be public hearings. So if you keep track of the borough's website, there's different ways you can kind of keep track of what's going on.
I didn't want to step up because I wasn't here for that, but this traffic guy, I drive a truck for ShopRite. Okay, been driving since A&P was involved. Over 40 years in the Union 863. Where he's talking about by 8A, that is the most congested area because I worked out at Cranberry Warehouse in Jamesburg there. It's full of trucks. When you can't get through there with regular cars. Plus the roads are a lot wider over there than they are in Sayreville. So I could see a potential problem with this, with the roadways. You know, when you're talking a couple of hundred trailers, I mean, like I said, ShopRite, I work out of Elizabeth now, we got 300 doors. You know, it's this trail, and we are 24/7. So he's telling you nobody's gonna be there 24/7. I'll guarantee you they'll be there 24/7. People are not paying the rent today to just be open for 8 hours. You know, but I'll try to come back on the next meeting, and I appreciate you guys hearing me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
From the Zoom, is there any public that would like to speak? Jim, did you want to speak?
No, I have nothing to say, but thank you.
Okay. Second.
Second.
Also, Chairman, our next meeting is, Jay,
Chairman, your next meeting is September 7th. You do not have any applications scheduled. The meeting after that, the 21st, you do have something scheduled, but nothing for your September 7th meeting.
would you like a motion to close? I mean, motion
Motion.
to cancel?
Cancel the September 7th meeting. Second.
Second.
Okay, great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Everybody have a great night.
Thank you.